The biggest part that we look at in our training theory is that we're not just looking for physical attributes, we're looking for behavioral traits. You know, if you work out, you feel different, right? So the fastest way to change your state is to move your physical body, and that changes your state. That's actually the underlying theme to almost everything that we do. All right, let's go. We can gather in this way too, so move around this side, move around the machines. If you have to, stand on a machine, something like that. It's not too complex. Okay. Also, people can come here too, I guess. Good? Good. How many guys we got? 1, 2, 3, 4. A lot. 20? Yeah, we got a lot. Cool. Awesome. All right, so let's explain what's going on. Who kind of knows the background, doesn't know our background? Doesn't really matter. We'll focus on today and we'll get into the specifics of what we're doing. Along the way, this is like an educational process, which means like if there's something that we do that you don't know why or you want to know more about, feel free to poll and go into the details of it. There is a lot of work, which will explain why we do a lot of work, but the whole point of it is to give little tidbits to some of the technical aspects of how we train, because it is quite a bit different than most people's high intensity or group training. We break things up a little bit differently. We run a very small boutique gym. We train only 2 classes a day. It's invite only. We only have 35 members. We are not a big box gym. Most of what we do is virtual education for people on concepts of how to train, not what to train. Does that make sense? We don't tell people how to exercise. We give them the theory behind so that they can control and make up their own design training that fits what they need. Because to us, the definition of fitness is very individual, right? So anybody here want to define fitness for me? Without using the 10 terms from CrossFit. So fitness is very clearly task dependent. Somebody who is fit to run a marathon is not fit to deadlift 3 times body weight and vice versa. So you adapt to the very specific things that you want to adapt to, and everybody's life requires a little bit different. James is a firefighter, right? Erin is a nutritionist, but she's an athlete by hobby. So we all have like different things that we need out of training, and that is really what we look at. The biggest part that we look at in our training theory is that we're not just looking for physical attributes, we're looking for behavioral traits. Does that make sense to everybody? This might if you work out, you feel different. Right? So the fastest way to change your state is to move your physical body, and that changes your state. That's actually the underlying theme to almost everything that we do. When we show up in the morning in our gym, we don't write a workout ahead of time. In most cases, this is actually very unusual. We wait to see who shows up. We ask them how they feel, and then we drive it from there. So we try to drive the training to affect the people that are in a room, as opposed to having people fit into our contained box of 5x5s this, progression overload here, because sport training to us is a specific task that not many people are aiming for. So although all the tenets of progressive overload and all the sports theory, all of that applies when we want to affect physiology, we want to become stronger, we want more endurance, we want more aerobic capacity, we abide by the rules of progressive overload. But for the most part, we're looking for state changes on the day. If you don't leave here feeling better, we didn't really do our job correctly. Better doesn't mean I'm not a sweaty pile of mass on the ground. It just means that I've changed my state to be something more directed than how our environment affects you. Does that make sense to everybody? Cool. All right. So Hell Weeks. Besides the fact that we really train on theory based on behavior traits, developing like systems that will give us more confidence, that will give us more creativity, that will give us all of the aspects that we look to like live better lives. Really what we're trying to drive is people's intuition for their own physical effort. When you're untrained, you don't want to do anything, right? Everybody remember not being in shape and not going to the gym every day. It's some of us, it's like hard to remember because it was so long ago. But there's a point that you have to understand that when your behavior or your habits aren't aligned, it feels terrible. So your intuition is actually not to train. And therefore, we can't really trust an untrained intuition. But like most people in here that are into CrossFit, once you prove that you can wake up and work hard, it's then really your job to prove that you're not dumb, right? To not just do a million thrusters for time, because that probably doesn't have the best outcome on the back end. So we work this scale where teaching people to work hard to break their intuition, and then teaching them to hone their intuition so that they know how to guide their own training and when to back off. That becomes the most important factor for us in longevity. Who in here has trained hard for longer than 15 years? Nice. How longer than 10? Nice. Longer than 5? Who is just under a year? So everybody at least has had the initial change. That's actually what we look for. We find a scale where we don't really start talking about longevity until somebody can break that habit of, I don't want to wake up, I don't want to train, I don't want to do the hard thing. We first have to break that before we can teach somebody to do the right thing. Hell Week, although in our curriculum, Hell Week is not to beat somebody down. It's really a way to teach people how to use all the methodology that we give them to intuit what they should do. There's no reward for finishing a Hell Week. And for us, in a Hell Week, we give anywhere from 10 to 12 sessions, that some of them are upwards of 2 hours each, depending on what we're doing. It is up to the person to decide what is too much and what is enough. And that is really the goal of training. If somebody can walk away feeling like, I got enough, and if I rest and recover, I will be in a better position, then they did it correctly. If they finish all the work and they're crushed for 2 weeks, did they do it right? If they did so much training that they can't train anymore, I think in a lot of the times they miss their point. So when we give a load of work, a lot of it is just there's lessons inherent in a lot of these different things. For our Hell Weekend that we're doing here, we really just wanted to share a bunch of concepts that we use. So we're going to go through some dynamic warm-up stuff. You guys are always going to be familiar with that, stuff that you probably do at home. We're going to get into some mobility to start, and then we get into something called a shakeout. A shakeout is something, because a lot of us traveled here, we don't know how everybody feels. We just want to move and sweat, and that's for you to tune into your own body to see how you feel. So you could do this for time. You do not have to. In fact, it's probably better if you just get through the structure and really do a full evaluation and assessment of how each joint feels, how your body's feeling as you start to breathe harder. Maybe you feel good, maybe you don't feel so good. That should tell you how to handle some of the what we call the meat of the section or the finisher, and that will tell you how to inform the loading process, the weighting, the intensity that you're going to use in order to have the outcome of feeling good when you leave. Now, all of this stuff will burn and it'll still be hard, but how hard is totally up to you, and we really measure that based on the shakeout. Another thing that we focus on quite a bit is a different style of mobility. We think of mobility from the joint out as opposed to the tissue. Does that make sense to most people? Has anybody heard of this theory? Okay, so we'll explain it real quick because it's fundamentally kind of different than most theory. Most people are foam rolling their hamstrings to kind of get them to loosen up, and then once you get them to relax, you're like, oh, I'm mobilized. Most people, right? What's interesting is what we find is that mobility is based off of the distance of the joint capsule. So your joint capsule, whether it's glenohumeral, whether it's your hip capsule, knee, it doesn't really matter. If there's two bones joining and there's tissue surrounding it, the distance, the congruency of the joint is what dictates what the tissues do. So mobility to us is not a muscle tightness or a connective tissue problem. It's actually a neurological problem based off of the coherence of the joint. If we can expand the joint, we get more space. Make sense to everybody? So we show you actually how to do that. We're going to add in one thing right here for everybody. It's called paling and railing. We use the same concepts for developing strength into developing mobility, and this is very different for people. It takes an extraordinary amount of time to understand how to do it, but once you plant this seed in most people, it changes how they feel about physiology and how they approach their own training. So we do want to spend a lot of time on this. If this is where we get stuck and we end up kind of fizzling out, that's okay. Whatever's the most valuable to you guys, we want to give you for today, and then you can walk away with something that like changes your thought process on your training. Does that make sense? Any questions for me?
No, I just have a question about your members. How do you help them to evaluate that? Like this, you told us about the hell week, the hell weeks, to evaluate if you did it too hard, or what's the method of that?
Well, it's subjective, right? So like if we want to use training, we first have to admit that to call it training, it has to be a strong enough stimulus for us to need to recover from it. So we have this initial kind of problem, and this is where I'd argue that a lot of people fall off with daily hard training. I don't think that's training. That's mostly exercise. So we need to see an evaluation like this. So this is like I start here, I train, I rest, I come up and I'm better. Now that's a short cycle. This will like bed, but if this was, let's call this a training cycle. So I had like a 6-week block or an 8-week block. I would have a tiny little oscillation in here that would represent how I increase or I progressively overload the system so that my body can recover from fatigue and then give me more attributes on the outset. Does that make sense? That's like classic periodization. Now, in most cases though, people just come in and they work really hard and they go down, and then they might come up and they work really hard and they go down and they work really hard. Now, these 2 points feel the same to the person who overextends himself in training. So I'll give you an example. You guys train with intensity almost every day, right? Yes. All right, so when is the last time you noticed, and this gets difficult because we also participate in what we call like a variety of training. So there's very few measurements to see where our fitness is at. But for instance, like when's the last time that you saw a true kind of increase in fitness ability through a measured test that was, logged? It could be like my Fran time got better, or, this 2K row decreased in time, something like that. After the first initial 6 months to a year of high intensity training, most people don't see those elevations in fitness. They might see, their lifts get better. So you snatch more, you deadlift more. That's a neurological issue and sometimes has to do with a skill set issue. I would argue that most people who are doing high intensity training too frequently, when they do see increased numbers, it's because of skill improvement, not fitness improvement. And these two are very hard to parse. You're like, if I give you a workout today and the movements are a little bit complex, like let's call it like a burpee, box over, and you're not used to that, tomorrow your time will be faster because you got better at the skill of getting over the box. It simply has to do with kind of coordination problems. That's not, a faster time doesn't mean more fitness sometimes. So a lot of the times that we measure fitness, what we do see is that it doesn't improve when we have too much high intensity signaling too frequently. We don't recover from it. So we separate training from exercise, to come back to your question. Exercise is not bad. We just admit that what it is. And that's why when we come in, I say, hey, this is not training, right? This is to feel how you should feel. And most days, I think you come in, I would say half the time it's just exercise. I'm like, today's not the day. It doesn't mean I can't sweat. It doesn't mean I can't move things around, but it's not training because I'm not increasing the stimulus in order to get a response. And that's okay too. You don't have to always get physiologically better. Now, I explain all of this because I think this is this gets missed, but who's run a mile time trial? What's your best mile time trial?
Oh, that's like 15 kilometers or something?
Yeah, 1,500, yeah.
I think like 40 minutes. Oh, it's...
No, oh, what, so...
No, sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. I was like, that's your mile bear crawl.
No, say like 6 or 7 minutes.
Yeah, okay, so let's say you PR'd, we'll call it 6 minutes, right? And you come in and we're like, we're gonna train today. And I'm like, What do you think you could do a mile time trial today in?
Today,
Yeah.
who's competing with me?
Yeah, today, it's on. You're gonna, 6 minutes. That's where you're gonna aim, and you're gonna aim to beat it. So let's say we go out, we're all cheering you on because of the energy and you know how that works. You run a 5:58 and you're like, yes, PR, and we all high five you, do that thing. And then you come back tomorrow and we're like, you think you could do 5:57? You're like, yeah, I think so. And then we get behind you and we cheer you on and holy shit, you ran a 5:56 and you're just like blowing PRs out. We're like, oh, okay. And then the next day you come back. Well, eventually there's gonna be a day where that doesn't happen, right? Your nervous system, your musculoskeletal system, whatever, is gonna be fatigued and you're not gonna be able to produce a winning time. So maybe you run 6:05 because you're just like, I feel terrible. And you go, yeah, you feel the same. You feel terrible, but your performance is actually worse. And this is what most functional training falls into, fatigue resistance. So training for most people is trying to understand where the performance is at the right level that you can get an accommodation to it, like an adaptation to the fitness stress, and that is its own kind of skill. So Hell Weeks for us in our curriculum, we teach people to really make a difference, make a decision about whether they're training, whether the stimulus was high enough to cause a response, or whether they're just moving through some stuff. The difference being is like, we see this trend too, and that's what made us kind of like aware of it. People come in, you've got high vibes, everybody, a couple people feel good, they're throwing down. I don't feel that good, but also I want to feel good about my effort, so I kind of like, and then after I like fall down on the ground, I'm like, yeah, it was so bad. It was so bad. And you're like, you get the drama of hard training, but you don't get the reaction from hard training. So we built a culture in high intensity training where the act sometimes is more important than the action. And you're like, we don't want to act. And that's really how we train people, is that we bring them in and we go, we can tell when it's real performance. And if somebody really is pushing as hard as they can, but I go, that really was pathetic. Because you can't trick a machine, right? Like, anybody wrote a 2K for time? Right? You're like, you can't, I row a 6:33 2K. I'm not doing that today, right? I know what the performance metric is. If I'm rowing repeated 500s, a 1:37 is as fast as I can row for 5 intervals, right? Of 500 repeats. If I do 4, I can actually hold a 1:36. If I do 3, I can hold a 1:35. If you know that about yourself, then I know what the training stimulus is required in order to go harder. Now, if I'm doing hard training and I'm pulling as hard as I can, I'm only seeing a 139, a 140, or sometimes a 145. I just don't have it today. I'm like, pull it. Just bet, like, it's not enough to do you any good. It's enough to do you some harm. So this came from the Australian Institute of Sport, where not only do they only let people train when they're in a very specific state, they send them home. That's really, you show up and you're a lower enough margin, they're like, get out of here. You can't turn it on. Or if you come in and you're pinging off the rafters and you're like above average, they also tell you to go home because you don't fit into this very specific cycle where they can control the fitness output. And this is like the big difference, is like being in the correct state in order to achieve like the results that I want. So for us, it starts from kind of like day one. When they come in, we start asking them how they feel. It's not a rhetorical question. We really want them to be like, my knee, my shoulder, I feel kind of foggy, I feel tired, I feel like this, my brain is busy, I'm thinking about the outside world. And we just, okay. And then we show them how we coordinate training according to their feeling. We're not just giving them what they want, but we're directing training based off of how they feel. And when they feel better when they leave, we just stack on top of that. Then when we come to a week like this, we let all of our inputs go and we let them try to feel it themselves. So they, hopefully when we give the entirety of the week to somebody, they go, not for me. I think that is actually the best education somebody could get. And we did it, a couple weeks ago. We had a 400-meter lunge with like, I think, what was it? It was like 40 kilo and no, it was like 30 kilo and 50 kilo, 400 meter lunge. Every time you break, it's like, I don't know, 3 burpee broad jumps, something like that. Terrible. It's terrible. It's just like what we call an SMMF, or SMMF. Does that make sense? It's a single movement mindfuck, right? You're just like the same thing, just one lunge. And thankfully, like we know who has like a knee issue or a hip issue or a back issue, and we don't tell them, but they see it, and if they don't understand themselves that that is actually going to cause more harm than good, they failed. Because in the end, they're the one who has to deal with the injury, right? And if they don't figure that out, so a lot of people were like, man, I'm not feeling that one. And you're like, why not? You're like, I don't know, my knee is bothering me. You're like, good, don't do it. Like, you don't lose any brownie points. You know, just because you don't get a gold star at the end of the day that's not a real consequence. Does that make sense? The long-winded way of like saying that is the overarching theme to our training. This also means that it's not scalable, unfortunately. Right? We're not going to ever have 300 members at our gym because we can't watch them, because there's only 3 coaches. Right? So we're a very small outfit. Mostly what we do is use them to experiment and teach other people this methodology, if that makes sense. Yeah. Very good.
How would you use this methodology in a CrossFit class if I want to do CrossFit 5 days a week?
Well, I think the data is very clear that you should break systems. Everybody's aware of energy systems, right? You have strength, you have power, aerobic capacity. Strength endurance is what we call hypertrophy. You have endurance-based, stuff like that. So we break things apart by energy system first, and that is mostly, like, what is hard for endurance training is not the same thing that's hard for hard aerobic training, right? They're 2 totally different aspects. They do work cohesively together, but they do have to be separated. So who was training CrossFit in like 2016? Anybody? A couple people here? Yeah. You're like, you remember the hodgepodge, like the you know, what's a word for it? The buffet of training, right? It's like all you can eat. You start out, you're like, I'm mobilizing. You're like, that feels good. And you're like, now I'm gonna do a hard AMRAP. Now I'm gonna do a strength. Now I'm gonna do gymnastics. Now I'm gonna do another hard AMRAP. Well, all of that doesn't work. And that's like what we know about training, is that it's system specific until the pathway sets. So if I set, you know, for an easier kind of like understanding, if I back squat 5 by 5 at 85%, which is a terrible workout. I don't know, has anybody done that? All right, if it's 85%, that is, you're done, right? Imagine doing 5 by 5 back squat and then running 10 miles zone 2. Right? Which one do you get? Technically, but it's also not probably a real zone 2 because you just smashed your legs. You probably don't have the ability to run at the desired rate in order to get the aerobic adaptation, which is mostly mitochondrial, left ventricle hypertrophy, you know, capillary function. All of that stuff won't happen because you're just slogging through it, and it's very hard to hold the correct pace for the run. So that becomes fatigue resistance. It's almost nothing. It's basically a beat down. You're like, you did a lot of work. Will you get anything out of it? I mean, kind of, maybe, but the difference being, if I do my strength work in the morning, I rest, I recover, I eat, and then I do my aerobic work at night, much better results. And that's because as soon as I hit a signal, this releases a pathway. That pathway is like AMPK, all of these signaling pathways. That tells my body how to like recover from it. And if I don't do that, I won't get the adaptation. So there is something, you know, it's like, unfortunately, in our culture, our American culture is terrible for like teaching people fitness. Our like fitness gods are like David Goggins. He's like, get out there and ruin your knees. And you're like, you're not gonna be able to walk when you're 50. That isn't fitness, right? Second side note, because I think this is important, in our curriculum, we're not exercise obsessed. Now, we love training. Like, I'm obsessed with training. I am not solely focused on repeated exercises. I'm not trying to get better at exercise for the sake of exercise. And this is a very different problem, something that CrossFit obviously is responsible for changing the paradigm in fitness for the better, right? Before everybody was like on the ellipticals doing fat burning zone. And then we introduced this concept of like hard training to the general public that was basically either special military or sport specific training. Other than that, you probably never saw like a max heart rate in your life, unless you were like running from a bear or something. So that, definitely good. The side effect of that is it really prioritized people becoming efficient at exercise. Efficiency at exercise has its drawback, causes accommodation. So whatever you get good at specifically, there's an equal opposite reaction to conforming your physiology to make you good at that thing. At first, that's really nice because, you know, as a runner, if I want to get good at running, I start to compress the knee joint, which shortens the Achilles, which shortens the ankle, which makes me have a better spring. So now I can run more efficiently for longer. But eventually, that shortened distance compressed joint becomes an articulation and arthritis in the bone. And now, eventually, with too much running without any counterbalance, I have arthritic knees or bone on bone, or I eroded the cartilage because I didn't take care of the joint. That is the same is true of running is thrusters. It's the same thing. It's an exercise pattern that gets repeated too much. We accommodate, and then, I mean, how many people in here were really good at a movement and now that movement feels like it hurts them? But deadlifting, thruster, it's like front squats for me. I maxed out on front squat every day for 37 days because I loved it. Now if I do it, almost every time something feels off, right? I've set my physiology so much that my body's accommodated, and now I have to do countering exercises or patterns to unwind it. So although we're doing exercises like patterns, we're really trying to pay attention to the variety and counterbalancing exercises. This is probably the most complex thing. What it comes from is understanding that all of our science, I mean 99% of all the stuff that you guys use today comes from the Soviet system. Right? Soviet sport system is what basically gives us almost everything. So our powerlifting, our weightlifting, our scales for jumping, so our depth jumping, what leads to the biggest plyometric adaptations. All of that was discovered. Verkhoshansky and a couple other scientists were really responsible for discovering what made the best athlete. But that has been converted into mainstream education, and it's very different. We're not trying to win a medal for Mother Russia, and that they were expendable, and nobody wants to admit this, right? Nobody wants to admit that when you become a master in sport in the Soviet system, they generally prepare you. That's called GPP. That's where we get a lot of our terminology. General physical preparedness gets an athlete to start sport specialization until they become a master of sport. What they identified is you have exactly about 10 years to peak, 6 to hit your peak, 4 to hold your championship. After that, guess what? No data. Why? Retire them. So you have the use of progressive overloads, using exercises that were responsible for sport that are now bled into mass population. A clean and jerk is a sport. A snatch is a sport. A squat is a sport. And this is where it becomes very different. Now, this is gonna make maybe some of you a little bit angry, but a squat does not make a healthy hip, it requires one. There's a difference. That is the biggest difference. I want all the attributes that are expressed through exercise, but exercise itself does not come back in and create the environment. So that is where it's a little bit different. Does that make sense? It's a deep wormhole. Because then you start going, well, what do I do? And you go, I know, I'm freaking out too. I'm with you. It's complex. There's not really good answers. And the people at the top are like, back squat. And you're like, but it feels terrible. And I'm not going to be able to walk when I'm 60, right? There's something that is inherently wrong in our fitness education. We are exploring what that is and how to get away from the traps. Right now, I think the best thing to do is to use sport to understand physiology and then get away from competitive sport as fast as possible. That seems to be the way, for longevity as the goal. If everybody want to hike when they're 80, play with their grandkids. Most people here, maybe,
Yeah.
right? That's what we're talking about. Now, I also want to run fast. I still want to do high rocks. I still want to compete. So it's really about like, doing enough that I can get the experiences that I want out of life so that I can also do it for a long time. Clear? Let's talk about today. Primer, dynamic primer, super simple, 3 rounds, 30-second rebound, an alternating kick, dynamic lunge. If you're not familiar with any of this stuff, I will show you out there. After the dynamic lunge, 30-second third world squat to a crouch. It's just a deep knee bend. We'll show you this out there too. Go 3 times through that. Again, assess how you feel. A lot of these movements, when I first do the first round of them, I'm like, ugh, get into a squat. I'm like, I'm feeling a little bit tight, something like that. I want you to be very aware of that. First mobility is just a hip car. Everybody know what a hip car is? Controlled articular rotation. We'll show that because this is like money. This is the cream of the, where's Andreas? This is this. All right. And then we'll go shake out. We'll set up for this, again, not for time, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, calorie machine of your choice. Could be a bike, a skier, a rower. You'll notice we use a lot of machines, a lot of aerobic machines, mostly because it's data, right? You're like, if I'm lifting a weight, it's really hard to tell, other than the number of the load, how efficient I am. Machines make this a lot easier to really scan and be like, man, this pedaling is hard today. You're like, that's actually, and I can look at the pace and the speed and really understand where I'm at. A lunge, step up over, it's a reverse lunge, step up on a box, turn, step off the other side, reverse lunge. It's, you'll notice we also throw in quite a bit of coordination into normal movements, but also just because I figure we are, too sagittal plane in training, almost everything comes from this. We're always trying to turn a little bit or add a dynamic variation to it. This is just an example of that. And then a push-up just to start getting the upper body involved in some of the stuff. So 5 calories, 5 lunge step up over, 5 push-ups, then 10, 10, 10, 15, 15, 15, 20, 20, 20, 25, 25, 25. This is just a very average, extended aerobic warm-up that you'll see in our stuff quite a bit. Then we'll get into the mobility, shoulder cars, leaning cars, capsule cars, and flexion hover. We'll also do a pail and rail to teach you guys how we open a joint capsule, because that's probably, I think, maybe the most important part to exercise. I'll explain why. And then we have the meat. We're switching systems. This is mostly aerobic. This gets into what we call strength endurance or hypertrophy. I think it is probably one of the most underutilized systems. Now, people obviously know about bodybuilding, but I think what you noticed if you saw the CrossFit functional crowd, they started to blend this very, very well at the highest level because they recognized that just high intensity was unsustainable, but they needed more training and they needed more efficiency. So they would generally do bro pumps, but then some high intensity, and that's where you have, Marcus Philly, this is what Matt Frazier fell into, this is a Noah Olson thing. This is all based on the fact that this system is so hyper supportive of joint architecture. Therefore, I'm always putting blood into the muscle and moving it. And if we use it correctly, I think it's an ingenious way to get more exercise in, to get feeling better without overloading the nervous system. So same scale, we love ladders here too, because I always like when people can choose correct weights. And if you start low and a little bit heavy, you can adjust along the way as the reps go, and you don't feel bad about it. But if I write, if this is 60 reps in my optimal range and I write, 6 by 10 at a certain weight, somebody picks up, say, a 35-pound or a 16-kilo kettlebell or something, and they go, oh man, that's too heavy. Their ego gets in the way of them making adjustments that's better for their physiology. We want to erase that idea. Sometimes you just don't know what's too heavy and what's too light. Sometimes you need to make adjustments. Ladders are probably the best psychological way to do it, because as the reps get higher and higher, you're going to have to make adjustments. Does that make sense to everybody? So this one's a little bit different. A seated clean and press with dumbbells. So I just sit down. It's a strict act. It feels very strange if you're not used to it. A very good shoulder pump. A seated skier which is very different. Most people are going to cramp in their abs and their hip flexors. And then a rope sled pull, which is outside. You can also do this seated. Again, we like to isolate, something that, you know, maybe is frowned upon in the functional crowd, but we do like to do it. So that's 4 sets through each of these, and then we'll finish with a lot of functional stuff. We carry a lot of things. So a zombie walk is a 10-meter zombie walk. It does not take a lot of weight. Like most people with like 2 kilos should be okay. So I walk 10 meters like this, I walk 10 meters like this, I walk 10 meters like this, and I walk 10 meters like this. This is the rest because it's very light, but you're gonna do as many laps as possible in 7 minutes. So I just keep going through this, right? It's gonna be very upper body dominant. You will have to rest at some point, I promise, but that's okay. It's all over in 7 minutes. It's not a big deal. Sound good, everybody? Yep. Any other questions? Yep.
Just what you said on the ladders,
Yep.
why you like it, because you're saying that it will generally force people to make a weight change.
Yeah.
Because it's sort of, they can't ignore it as the rest increases.
Right, yeah.
Whereas if it's like straight sets,
Yeah.
they might try and squeeze extra sets out. That's what we're going to.
Or that, yeah, that, or what will happen is like, you know, for me, if you gave me 6 by 10, I would probably, like on a good day, if I felt like, oh, today I'm training for a clean and press, I would pick, with a 24 kilo or something. That would be like a good stimulus. I'm looking at it like rounds 4, 5, and 6 would be extremely challenging. It's almost like the other rounds are warm up. But if I pick them up and the first set is challenging, I'm like, I know I can do this. I'm going to force myself to do this because I don't want to feel like I'm a low performer, and I don't want to feel like people like, oh, I changed weight. Like your ego gets involved into it, but that doesn't matter because I start compromising the lift. I start like excessive back extension. It's not a press anymore. It's more like a bench press. That's the compromise we make in order to achieve the weight goal. But the loading is supposed to enforce the response, not the response enforce the loading. Does that make sense? Only because that helps decide the system. Descending ladders are great too, but it would be more of a strength variant because as I go down in reps, I can go up in load. So I can enforce the sensation that we want by just going up or down in reps. Yeah, and if I want, you know, overload, I'll pyramid. But one way or the other, I find that you'll get more of a pump with accelerated reps because you have to generally go lighter contraction or the time under tension is longer. When you go down, it makes you feel actually a little bit better because you're like, yeah, I can go up in weight. So you leave feeling different. That's it. Best way to put it. Still optimal reps. You'll still get very similar strength response, but yeah, it's a good question. All right, you guys ready?